Well, welcome again. Oh, that's a little loud. We've been walking through the summer, looking at a topical series on faith, what it is, how to get it, how to increase it. We've been looking through these narratives that the writer of Hebrews gives us. Fascinating stories, really, of these Old Testament people. And as we've looked back at them, what you started to see, hopefully, is that though they're held up as these models of faith, they're extremely messed up people. They're extremely fouled up, and they've lived, messed up lives, and they've made horrible decisions sometimes with their lives. And yet, they're given to us as examples of what faith looks like. And today we get to the one, which is, I got to be honest, probably my favorite character in all of the Bible, Joseph. And if you know anything about Joseph's life, he's had a fascinating life. He's had peaks, he's had valleys, he's gone through so much. And yet, the writer of Hebrews chooses to exemplify Joseph's faith with his bones. Now, if you read that, or if you listened to that passage, like me a few months ago when I was preparing for this, you say, what the what? What? Who? Bones? How does bones have anything to do with faith at all? Why? Why would the writer of Hebrews talk about Joseph giving up his bones as a way to say this is what faith looks like? And I racked my brain over it, and I read countless books that I could find about what are the bones and what's going on here. And what I found is that in this short passage, the very short passage, there is a profound model of what forgiveness looks like. And Joseph gives it to us. You got to peel it apart a little bit, but it's there, and it's beautiful, and it's profound. But the bones. Do something with me, mental exercise, okay? Take the bones, put them in a bag if you can. Put them in like a mental bag, does that work? And put them over to the side, just for now. Just put the bones in a bag for the side. I'll get to that. I'll work on that one. But what I find fascinating about why the writer of Hebrews chose this is if you know anything about Joseph's life, it's been a roller coaster. There are many other stories he could have told about Joseph. For example, favored by his father because he was the son of Rachel, the first love of his father. Given that fancy, multicolored coat, which would have been extremely expensive at the time to give. And he has dreams, and he has dreams about his brothers, and he goes to them and says, someday you're going to bow down to me. And so his brothers start to hate him. And then his brothers, they're out in the fields, and they have a little plot. And they say, let's kill him. That puts any sibling rivalry you have into perspective, does it not? They say, let's kill him, let's get rid of him. So they throw him into the bottom of a well. Then Judah, one of his brothers, stands up and says, listen, we don't really gain anything if we kill him, so let's sell him into slavery. Because as you all know, that's a lot better than being killed, right? Judah's got this great idea. Let's sell him into slavery. That's more merciful. So Joseph goes into slavery, right? He's in slavery. He's working in his master's house. He slowly climbs the ranks. The master kind of likes him. All of a sudden one day, the master's wife accuses him of sexual misconduct, sexual harassment. Back to the dungeon. Joseph's in the dungeon. He works his way back up. He slowly, over a long career, he in essence becomes the vice president of what is the most powerful country at the time. He's number 2 in command. He's putting policy into effect. He's instilling programs. He actually foresees agricultural trends and is able to store up enough food so that when a famine hits, he saves thousands of lives. He also saves the lives of his father and his brothers who come and they get fed and then they survive. And after a little bit of needling, he forgives them. He forgives the very people who threw him into the well. He forgives the very people who sold him off into slavery and took the trajectory of his life in a way that it never was supposed to go. Then, 17 years after that, their father, Jacob, dies, and that's where we enter the story today. And the brothers start to panic. And so they make up a letter, they falsify a letter, and they say the summary of the letter is, hey Joseph, Daddy said don't hurt us. Daddy says be nice to us. And that's where we pick up the story today. And there's three things that Joseph does, which are an amazing model of forgiveness and why his faith was a forgiving faith. Keep the bones in the bag, I'll get to them. But he does three things. First, he steps off his throne. Secondly, he changes his view. And lastly, he gives up the bones. What does that mean? He steps off his throne, he changes his view, and he gives up his bones. Let me unpack this first. He steps off his throne. The brothers make up this letter. It's saying, this is from Dad. And Dad says, don't hurt me. And did you see in verse 17 what his original reaction is? When he gets this message from his brothers, it doesn't say that he gets angry. It says that he weeps. You can imagine, this is Joseph, number 2 in command of Egypt. He's sitting probably on a throne, on a big, huge chair, in a big, huge room. He gets this message from his brothers saying, just don't hurt us. We know that you forgave us 17 years ago, but now we're not really sure. And you can imagine Joseph's reaction. Joseph's sitting there with the ultimate facepalm in all of human history, saying, don't you get it? Don't you get what I've done? And his brothers, because they operate more like you and me, they don't get it. They think surely he must be holding a grudge. Surely he's still sitting on the throne of judgment, looking at us and judging us. And Joseph weeps and he weeps. And he has this beautiful line. He says, fear not. Am I in the place of God? See, when you and I hold a grudge over somebody who's wronged us, we want what happened to Joseph. We want them to come and bow down to us. And Joseph's brothers come and they bow down, and he looks at them and he says, but you don't get it. You don't get that I've gotten rid of that. You don't get that I'm not holding the grudge. What Joseph's done is he's gotten off the throne of judgment. Here's Joseph, powerful, important, influential. And he has every right to demand that his brothers bow down and beg for mercy. And he says, why would I do that? Am I in the place of God? It's not my right to right all the wrongdoings. Joseph gets off the throne of judgment, of grudge bearing. Now, what does this look like? What does it mean to step off the throne, to get off the throne? What does that even mean? Let me give you a real application for us, and I'm going to tell you a story. And it's a story about a woman named Ava Corps. And here's the story of what it means to step off the throne. You can follow along on the screen as I read this. This came from a news article in 2005, published about Ava Corps and Joseph Mengele. A quick look at the medical charts was enough. You have just 2 weeks to live. The doctor said. That was it. He then left the sick bay without giving his patient, the 10-year-old Ava, any medication at all. Why should he, when he wanted the young Romanian girl to die? The doctor, Joseph Mengele, had himself injected her with the lethal content of bacteria. It was the spring of 1944 when Ava Corps, along with her twin sister Miriam and her mother, arrived in the concentration camp, Auschwitz-Birkenau. When the family climbed down from the train, an agitated SS guard ran up to them and yelling, "Twins, twins, twins!" And a few moments later, Ava and Miriam were torn away from their mother. They never saw her again. Now let me give some information here. Why were twins important? Because what Dr. Mengele was doing was injecting one twin with a bacteria to see how the body reacted and to compare it to the other twin's body without the bacteria. And because he did this, he killed over 1,400 sets of twins, testing them. And here he injected Ava as a 10-year-old girl with this bacteria to watch her die. Fast forward more than 60 years, and the young girl Ava is now a woman of 71. She has curly white hair and is, on this Tuesday evening, sporting a blue outfit with short sleeves and a silk shawl. On her left forearm, her tattoo from Auschwitz is still easily visible, A-7063. Yet while the fact that Ava is still alive may be astounding enough, it is her presence in Hamburg at the invitation of the Corps Foundation this week and the German debut of a documentary film about her life that really takes one's breath away. The film is called Forgiving Dr. Mengele, because that is exactly what Ava Corps did. See, what happened to Ava, Dr. Mengele died and she couldn't meet him, but she found and tracked down one of the doctors who had worked with him in the camp and who had been acquitted of the crimes. His name was Dr. Munch. And she said to her friends, I need to go see him. I need to go see this monster. I need to go see this person who was almost the direct result of so many lives lost. So she got out in our house in Indiana, traveled from the United States over to Germany, and she went to meet Dr. Munch. And the story ends this way. She was incredibly nervous when she finally found herself standing in Munch's door, Corps says. But then, an elderly gentleman with snow-white hair, a carefully trimmed beard, and a shy smile opened the door. Yes, he admitted. He had been there during the gassings. And that's my problem, he went on. He still suffers from depression and nightmares as a result. Corps had gone looking for a monster, but found a human being instead. Now, where this gets really interesting is that a few months after this meeting, Ava Corps and Dr. Munch went arm in arm to a meeting of Holocaust survivors. And she stood up with the doctor and she said this line, which infuriated everybody. She says, in my own name, I forgive him. And everybody looked around and said, how could you possibly do that? Look what he was responsible for. Look what he did to you. You got injected by the guy he worked with. How dare you forgive him? They were infuriated. They were incensed. And she just repeated the same phrase. In my own name, I forgive him. Sometime later, somebody asked her why, and she said, it's because when he opened the door, I saw that shy smile, and I knew he was just like me. See what Ava Corps did? She had every right to sit on the throne, and she could have sat there, and she should have said, he will pay for what he did, not only to me, but for countless others. She says, I get off my throne. He's a human, like me. And this is what Joseph does with his brothers. As he weeps, he had every right to sit on the throne of judgment and to look at his brothers and say, now you pay it down. But he says, I'm not God. It's not my place. He will right the wrongdoings. Now, stop for a second. Because I want you to, before I go to the second point, the next point, it's very easy if you stop there to go, oh, that's good, that's Christian forgiveness, right? Just forget everything everybody's ever done to you, all the wrongdoing, be Pollyanna, smile it away. And that's not what Joseph does, because of the second point. He changes his view. Do you see what next he says to his brothers? He doesn't just say, all is forgiven and done, no harm, no foul, big guys. He looks at them and he says, you meant it for evil. He identifies evil. And he does something that's very hard for you and me to do in terms of forgiveness. When we are wronged, there is a spectrum. There's a spectrum where on one end you can say, I'm just going to ignore it and move on and brush it under the rug. Joseph doesn't do that. And on the other spectrum, you're going to say, listen, I'm going to exact all the payment from them. I'm going to wallow in this. What they did to me was horrible. I can't get over it. I can't stop thinking about it. And Joseph marries these two together to say, listen, There is wrongdoing in the world. Life is difficult. People will hurt you. He says, you meant it for evil. But I see that God's got a plan in this. He sees it. Let me illustrate it this way. Back in, I guess it's my native Los Angeles. I don't even know if you call it native. I guess so. Los Angeles. It's a very polluted town. It's smoggy. It's got a lot of air pollution. But the interesting thing about Los Angeles is that it's sort of in a basin. It's surrounded by mountains. A little bit. And when you're walking through the streets of Los Angeles, you probably wouldn't even notice the pollution at all. But one of the things I liked to do when I was in Los Angeles was go hiking up the mountains. There was a big mountain behind my house, and I loved to go up the mountain. And what's interesting about Los Angeles is if you climb the mountain and you look back at the city, what you'll see is a ring, it's sad, of pollution. You'll see it. It looks like a cloud, but it's pollution. But what you also see from the mountaintop is the blue sky that's above that. See, what Joseph does is he changes his view. He could stay in the valley. He could stay down on the valley floor and say, all I see is evil and suffering. Look at what my brothers did to me. They threw me in a well. They sold me to slavery. I've been accused of wrongdoings, left and right. All of my life, people have wronged me. He could have gone on an endless tirade, an incessant autobiography, but yet he changes his view and he goes up the mountain. And he says, listen, not all is good in life. There is evil. There is wrongdoing. People do hurt you. You can't ignore it and move on and smile and whistle the day away. He says, you meant it for evil. I know that. But there is blue sky above the ring of pollution. He says, I see it now. See, for you and me to start to get a faith that forgives, we've got to start getting off the throne. We've got to start going up the mountain to change our view and change that perspective. But last, we've got to give up our bones. Now, that bag of bones that I talked about earlier, you can open it up. And I know you're probably wondering, what is going on with these stinking bones? Because in Hebrews, the writer says, listen, if you want to know about Joseph's faith, it's in his bones. Let me tell you what the bones mean. Joseph's bones were theologically meant to signify what would the rest and the comfort that would come to the Israelite people when they found a new home. This is why Moses and all the Israelites in the Exodus, they carry that bag of bones, the coffin. They carry it around with them. And it signifies, he says, bury me when you get to the place that you're going to find rest. You know what that means? If you've been coming the last few weeks, you've known that all of this is about a promise. God made a promise to Abraham, and it's trickling down the ladder. Now it gets to Joseph, and Joseph says, my bones are the promise that you need. My bones represent the comfort and the rest that you want in your life. He says, it's in my bones. Take them. You'll find the rest. You'll find peace. You'll find comfort. Now, wait. Who does he say this to? Do you notice? If you look back in your passage, he says, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry my bones. And he says it to his brothers. He looks at the people who wronged him the most. And this is the moment that he's dying, and he can get the last word in. He could say, you have nothing to do with my bones. No rest for you. No comfort for you. No security. Nothing. You don't deserve it. You wronged me. You hurt me. He could exact the last word. And when he gives them his bones, what he does is, he gives up the last word. He looks at his brothers. Can you imagine their old faces staring back at him? And this is the moment. Joseph's about to die. This is the moment where he can get in the last word, the needle. He can get to him. He can say, aha, I got you now. And he says, take me. All of me. See, when you and I are in conflict, more often than not, do we not love to get the last word in? Don't you love it? I love it. You don't care if you're right or you're wrong, you just want the last word. You don't care if it's the right word or the wrong word, you just want the last one. It feels so good to get that in, right before the person walks away. Or sometimes they walk away and then 5 minutes later you go, oh, I should have said that. I could have said that. You think of it later. This is Joseph's moment. He could say this. He could get him. He's got him. They're bowing before him. He's in his throne room, and he could put him to death if he wants to. And he looks at them and says, I want you to take me. I want you to take all of me. Take my bones. I don't get the last word. You do. You get it. And Judah, the very brother who sold him into slavery, there's one that comes from Judah many, many years later. In Isaiah 53, we see this one talked about. Out of Judah, the one who looks at Joseph, the one who sold him into slavery, and Joseph has his right in the sights, and he can nail him, and he says, I'm not going to do it. You take me. Thousands of years later, there's one who says, he was oppressed, and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shears is silent, so he opened not his mouth. Do you know what this is talking about? What were Jesus' last words on the cross? In Luke 23, he hangs, bloody, beaten, abandoned, lost, wronged, and he has the chance to get the last word in. And I guarantee you, if I was on that cross, I would look down at all the people and say, you have no idea what's coming to get you. You're going to pay for this. You're going to beg for mercy. And Jesus doesn't say that. He looks down at the very people who wronged him. And he says, into your hands I commit my spirit. Do you not see, brothers and sisters, this morning, that what Joseph did in giving up his bones was just a shadow of what Jesus did in giving up his bones for you? Jesus has every right to get the last word in. He's the Son. He's the Anointed One. He's the Messiah. He can do it. He can say, you're going to get this. You're going to get paid back. It's all going to come back to haunt you. All the wrong you've caused me. He could have done what Joseph could have done too. And Joseph says, I gave up my bones. And Jesus says, don't you see, I do that same thing for you. And everyone who sees Jesus doing this is absolutely amazed. This centurion, this enemy of Jesus, one of the people who probably put him on the cross, looks up and he hears Jesus' last words, and they're not words of condemnation, they're words of commendation. And his initial response is, surely this man must be innocent. Do you not see the power there? Joseph giving up his bones. Why did the writer of Hebrews say this? Because when Joseph gives up his bones, he says, in faith, I will forgive you. It's not going to be what suits me. It's going to be what suits you. I don't keep my bones. I give them to you. And his brothers could have done anything they wanted with his bones. They get the last word. He doesn't. He gives it up. Because it's just a shadow of what Jesus does on the cross for you and me. When he has every right to get the last word in on us, he gives it up. How then can you and I, if we reflect on that, not give up the last word for those who have hurt us? Joseph's whole life was pretty much destroyed by what his brothers did to him. That was not the way things were supposed to go according to Joseph. He wasn't supposed to be in the well. He wasn't supposed to be a slave. And yet he did it. And at the end of the day, he says, I give up my throne. I'm not God. He says, I can change my view. and see that whatever you meant for evil, God means for good. But ultimately, he can give himself up, utterly and completely. Take all of me, he says. Though you wronged me, I give myself up for you. And that is just a glimmer of what Jesus says on the cross when he can get the last word in. And his last word is a blessing for you and me. Do we forgive this way? Do you have a faith that you can forgive others for the wrong that they've done to you in your life? You're going to have to do what Joseph did. You're going to have to get off the throne. You're going to have to go up the mountain. You're going to have to give yourself up at times when it hurts. And the only thing that's going to empower you and me to do this is if we constantly, every day, every minute, look at the cross and see blessed forgiveness poured out for us. Mark Twain once wrote, "Forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it." Forgiveness is that fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. Go to him. Go to Jesus Christ. Repent and look at him being crushed for you. Smell that fragrance, and it'll be the sweetest thing you've ever smelled. That's the fragrance of forgiveness. But it takes us to repent and turn back. To turn back off the throne, up the mountain. Give up your bones today, because he first gave them up for you. What then can you not withhold from others? Pray with me.